Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say, every so often in this place, it almost feels like you're having an out-of-body experience where you're like watching something happen and you can't believe it's happening. So the idea that my Democrat colleagues are so offended that the First Amendment may be or may not be violated by some comment you made, I think is just extraordinary given the last 4 years that we lived through. I happen to know something about it. I filed the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit that a federal judge ruled was the most massive attack against free speech in U.S. history, where entire agencies, and we sat through the depositions, were weaponized against the American people on the instruction of the federal government, and not just one agency, but a leviathan of agencies that had words and phrases that you shall not utter in the United States of America or you are censored. So you don't get to censor speech, you don't get to outsource that censorship to universities or social media companies, which is exactly what was happening. And go so far as to actually create, and I would challenge anybody in this committee if they raise an objection to this, literally a disinformation governance board in the United States of America. That you remember the Mary Poppins character who was singing? That's what I'm talking. In the United States of America, not like in 1898, not in 1799, like 3 years ago. And so to sit here and listen to all this stuff about, wearing the white hat on free speech is laughable. Laughable. So anyway, I can't help myself sometimes. I wanted to get to these questions first, but just listening to this is incredible. So anyway, Mr. Carr, I do want to ask you about something that's I don't think's been asked about. Currently, there is a draft piece of legislation currently being considered by the European Commission, the European Union Space Act, which, as currently drafted, would impose a regulatory framework that would apply not just to EU firms, but also U.S. satellite operators providing services to European customers. It appears specifically targeted at U.S. companies due solely to their size and their success that they've had. From the FCC's perspective, what concrete impacts would these proposed requirements have on U.S. licensed systems operating globally, particularly where the EU rules may duplicate or conflict with current U.S. requirements?
Senator, thanks for the question. We all know that for years, Europe has been engaged in protectionist conduct. They've been going after U.S. technology companies simply for being successful U.S. technology companies. What we're now seeing is the specific application of that same approach into the satellite sector. European regulators are using the rubric of European satellite sovereignty to suggest that you effectively have to be a European satellite company to do business in Europe. Unlike the technology space, there actually are national champion satellite providers in Europe that do business in America. And so if Europe continues to go down this protectionist path, we're going to have to make sure that there's reciprocal and fair treatment. But it ultimately is holding back Europe itself, and it's harmful to these U.S. businesses that are trying to have global operations. So there is significant pushback right now on this sovereignty effort taking place in Europe.
Well, and it is, I think, part and parcel of something much broader that's happening in Europe right now, which is under the NATO flag, the United States is supposed to have sort of unconditional support no matter what. We're partners and this is an alliance, but when the EU flag goes up, all of a sudden it's a very, very different story. And I hope you do sort of push back on this idea, I think, ill-timed and likely illegal, but we have levers in the toolbox too. It shouldn't be the case, but if they're going to go down this road, hopefully you all will make it clear to our European friends that this isn't appreciated. I do want to, briefly in the time I have left, Mr. Carr, the U.S. already has for that licensing framework that we currently have in the U.S., what's the status of securing a kind of equivalence decision if equivalency isn't granted, staying on the European track here? How would overlapping EU requirements affect FCC licensed systems operating globally?
Well, for one, we're always going to look out for the interests of America and our consumers. So, for instance, we're looking at power level issues where perhaps Europe is in a different position than America. Europe may hold back on power levels in Europe, but we could authorize them here in America so that our consumers at least continue to get better, faster satellite services, including high-speed internet. We're also working inside the building to go much faster on processing satellite applications. When I took over as chairman, we had a massive backlog. We've already cut through about half of that backlog, and we're changing our approach inside the building to be much more assembly line-like. Clear, bright line rules. If you hit those, you're going to get a green light from the FCC pretty quickly. And again, I think that's going to set us up to lead the world in these next-generation satellite technologies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.